Struggle, strife, war, the god, in fact, of war, passion, sexuality, vitality. We are, of course, talking about the planet Mars, non-sacred co-ruler of the 6th ray. So if you're interested in finding out more about this planet, which plays a peculiar and particular role when it comes to discipleship and the sign of Scorpio, the battle between the selves, keep watching. Mars ruling the 6th ray has a connection to the solar plexus. It rules at the solar plexus, which is the seat of self-identification, self-consciousness as it pertains to body consciousness, body identification. The solar plexus is connected to the desire nature. Of course, Mars, in its association with Scorpio, also is connected to the sex organs, and so it can be connected to the sacral center as well. But we're really talking about the focused application of the desire nature, what we want. In Exoteric Astrology, it can be how we seek to get what we want. If we see exoteric Venus speaking more to our desires and values, Mars is how we get it. Sure, all of this is all true, but when we start examining it esoterically, it starts to represent an aspect of the dweller, actually, as the personality self that is a hindrance to the soul. That doesn't mean that Mars in and of itself is a negative or bad planet. On the contrary, its position in the pantheon esoterically considered really takes us through these tests and challenges. Scorpio ruling the tests of the Maya, testing the soon-to-be disciple, to overcome those aspects of the lower nature, of the desire nature. When it comes to this point, after that point of equilibrium and contemplation in Libra that we have discussed, the point of the reversal of the wheel, Mars then kicks into gear and activates this the battle between the two selves as the soul tries to inhabit the body. And in this case, Mars starts to represent the body and the form itself. Exoterically, it doesn't specifically speak to the body, although it is often connected to physical vitality, the bloodstream. Prominent Mars placements, let's say in the 1st house or at the midheaven, can often speak to strong men, sportsmen, this sort of thing. So it can be connected to the body in that way, but occultly considered, it really becomes the sum total of the personality in all of its different facets, at least when we're considering it from the point of view of someone entering discipleship and becoming a disciple. Okay, then it almost is a conglomerate for all aspects of the lower nature, including those components which are often reflected by the sun and the moon in terms of their exoteric or personality delineations there. Okay. So yes, it's the god of war, struggle, strife, and the battle between the selves, but the true motivation of Mars is to seek unity with its opposite. And when it comes to discipleship, it's really the union with its higher self. So this is where the hidden mystery of Mars really comes into place in terms of how we can relate to it in a way where we see it as supporting our evolution. It's not the same as gaining insight necessarily in the same way that Mercury delivers, bringing clarification and learning in that way. But Mars does show us the reflection of our lower nature. And this is here talking about Scorpio, its relationship to Scorpio, which it co-rules exoterically with Pluto, but it also rules it esoterically. Mars ruling Scorpio at the level of the personality speaks to the seething aggression, sneaky, not necessarily passive aggression, but that sort of waiting, hanging back, as opposed to the immediate reactivity that we can see in the sign like Aries, which Mars also rules exoterically. So yeah, the seething anger, broody emotionality, intensity, competitiveness as well is sometimes those attributes of Scorpio at the level of the personality. Not always, but sometimes. Esoterically, Mars seeks to serve that mirroring function, as we just touched on, to show us these parts of the psyche that need to come into resolution, whether they need to be come into a certain degree of unification, a claiming of that which has been unowned in some way. Well, that's also a bit more of the quality of the Aries Libra function, but certainly that mirroring function to bring consciousness into that which hasn't been discovered or overcome in the psyche. And then with this drive towards death, actually, so either a unification and a resolution, or that of death and sacrifice. And this reveals the urge towards the sacred warrior, the warrior for a cause, or as we see in Aries, for instance, moving from the blind ram, instinctual reactivity, and that's the Mars rulership there of Aries, being those hot flashes of solar plexus emotive energy and then shooting out through the mind in this conflicting ram-like way, from the ram to the sacrificial lamb, where it is the warrior for a cause, and that the way in which the lower nature as the personality self seeks to be a humble servant really to the goal of the soul. Let's go into Aries and Libra and consider the axis there. So we spoke about the ram-like thing of Aries. Exoterically, Aries' goal is to come into a point of balance where there's a sacrifice of the tendency towards territorialness with exoteric Mars, for instance. Me, mine, I want to beat you, this is mine, go away. This claiming of the personality self over the environment, the need to dominate the environment, that's the lower expression of Mars, the god of war there, creating conflicts where there doesn't need to be any. So the point of evolution for Aries is to come into that Libran point where there is a sacrifice of that individual self-preoccupation, self-identification, selfishness, of immaturity, into a sacrifice of that selfhood, sacrifice, hinting at the hidden key with Mars there, to come into relationship. And then we see that coming into Mercury in terms of the esoteric rule of Aries, coming in to solve the conflict there. But certainly moving to Libra, the sacrificing of that personal selfishness to come into the integrity of the relationship, and standing up instead for the love principle and reorienting that urge towards conflict arbitrarily to the harmony through conflict thing there. So we're seeing in Scorpio there's the evolution of Mars into the need to overcome the lower desire nature. In Aries, it's the need to overcome personal selfishness. So there are different aspects of selfhood and personality orientation there, with the occult function of Mars being the one who sacrifices itself. So when it comes to that point, when we move from Libra into Scorpio, at that point of discipleship where something has to be done, there's certainly there's a giving way to the soul over the body, over the personality self. Mars becomes then that which drives towards its own death. That's the sacrificial piece, because the personality does die. So we see hints here also to Christianity, sixth ray religions. Of course, Neptune plays a big part of that. Neptune being really that quality of mysticism that we see through all of the esoteric, in particular, underpinnings of the Abrahamic religions, for instance. The universal love, devotion to God, and all of these good things here. The Marsian quality can speak to that fanatical energy that we see in religion in some cases, where we have the blind emotional fervor that comes with that craziness of Mars, really the solar plexus energy, which is why there's such an interesting duality with religion, particularly the Abrahamic or the sixth ray religions, where the underpinnings of them are so deeply loving and mystical in that way, and yet all of the wars that we have seen, the crusades, all of that which has risen out of the warring against these different components. So this is Mars. So where we have the shadow of some of the religious fervor showing up as a war against matter, so then it becomes anti-sexuality or anti-feminine, because there is a hint here at actually occultly considered an overcoming of matter, an overcoming of materiality, and that there's a true purpose in that. There's a true alchemical, occult procedure of evolution in that. And yet from the level of psyche, the shadow of the Marsian energy creates these arbitrary conflicts, which is the lower expression of Mars. So it can be a difficult planet to work with in that case, and sometimes we see that expressed through people with Aries or Scorpionic traits. Mars in Taurus, let's go into that. Mars has its detriment in Taurus, Taurus being a fourth ray sign. It's a sign of struggle and not strife in the same way of Aries, but that struggle with the inner duality that can come with Taurus when you've got Mars in Taurus, which is its detriment. It adds to the warlike nature with Taurus. So it's kind of giving that emotional, personal oomph to those, in response to some of those flashes from Vulcan. So that's a strong first ray and destructive force there. So Mars in Taurus can really make that the battling with the form nature and the struggle really dense. So seeing how this emotional quality of Mars can have a difficult time in a heavy and dense sign such as Taurus. To whatever extent we can consider it being in detriment also in Libra. I've known a couple of people with Mars in Libra, and psychologically or from a personality point of view it can be an annoying placement, because that tendency to play the devil's advocate. So whereas Libra considers the two sides, if you've got Mars there, then it's like, I'm just going to take the opposite side. Almost in a way that's, we can see a bit of that in Aries, but it's more specifically to just be confrontational or jump onto the opposite side of something, sometimes for no good reason. It puts this weird emotional reactivity and instinctuality into this oppositional place, which creates this debate. We see a little bit of that too with Mars in Gemini. Let's consider the USA as from its bigger horoscope, its national horoscope, that is, the heightened emotional back and forth between the political dualities, for instance. So in those two air signs, we can see the problem where you've got to consider these 2 points and bring them into unity and synthesis, whereas the tendency for Mars is to create opposition and then play the battle out in that way. This is why Mars can be a bit of a difficult planet to work with, at least from the level of the personality. But as with all the planets, we see that when they come into right relationship, when they are all being governed by the urge towards synthesis, the urge towards love, the urge towards being obedient to and loyal sixth ray quality to the divine principle in whatever way that is calling to the individual, it is that of courage, the ability to sacrifice oneself, the giving up of the selfishness, in almost direct contrast to how that can express at the level of the personality in terms of personal desires and what me, myself and I want, etc. If you are someone who is responding to the impulses of the soul, and there is definitely some headway being made there, you want to watch Mars as it moves through your natal chart, because the transits there are going to, in a way that's a little bit similar to Mercury, they're going to reveal certain aspects of the life, particular tests, though, in a way that's a little different from Mercury, as we discussed. And this is the inflow of Scorpio coming through upon the fixed cross. Okay, and this is why when we talk about the 3 crosses, it becomes almost more important at a certain degree in terms of how we delineate certain aspects of the chart and the transits, because if you're responding to the soul, the signs upon the fixed cross and their planetary rulers and their activity are going to reveal more about what's going on in your individual life, for instance, right? So if you're responding to the soul, watch for Mars transits. It's going to reveal those places of test, trials, things that need to be overcome, tests of old desires of the past, for instance, tests of materiality, tests of old relationship dynamics, wherever it may be showing up, and whatever hooks you have in your personal life. And we can delve into that a little bit more, for instance, when we look at where Scorpio is in the chart, where Aries is in the chart, and any particular natal difficulties or highlighted points with the natal Mars placement, for instance. Mars is the hierarchical ruler of Sagittarius, speaking to ray 6 of the 3 rays that express through Sagittarius, which is 4, 5 and 6, where we've got the kind of blended unconscious fusion with the animal nature in the lower Sagittarian exoterically, which is the fourth ray quality, coming into the fifth ray concrete knowledge and science, where we're starting to respond to the intuition and sensing the goal. And that's where the esoteric ruler of Sagittarius, the earth, becoming more practical and steady measured progress, active intelligence with Sagittarius. Sixth ray, hinting towards this Mars quality at the hierarchical level, where Sagittarius becomes the one-pointed disciple. And once again, the focusing of the lower self, the personality self, the form itself, the form nature in sacrificial service to the goal and the will of the soul. So we can see where Sagittarius, occultly considered, becomes a very active, productive, specifically, sign of consistent activity. Mars really points to the way in which that the personality nature and the daily activity of the physical body in the lower three worlds is in consistent, constant sacrificial service, and just the pure physical vitality of the body in service to the creational desires of the soul. And before we summarize and get to the end, I did forget Cancer. Mars has its fall in Cancer and also exaltation in Capricorn. So the fall in Cancer, from the personality point of view, can be quite tricky, because we're seeing the emotional nature, that is Mars, attached to the past forms, attached to the realm of the mother. So in a similar way, where we have Mars in Cancer, or Mars on the Moon in Cancer, or Moon on the ascendant, for instance, there can be some particular challenges with breaking away from the past. The attachment to the personal needs that arises from body identification can be extra weighty in Cancer. However, from the soul-centered point of view, this is quite a beautiful placement, because we have that personal selfishness in how Mars expresses that exoterically, gives way to that Neptunian quality in Cancer, where it's about the needs of the whole. So it's actually quite a beautiful placement there, where we see the Mars quality line up with Neptune, the higher octave, the sacred sixth ray planetary ruler, as the esoteric ruler of Cancer there. In Capricorn, the exaltation is pretty clear, really. From the personality point of view, the ability to focus the vital energy of the body towards achieving the goals of the personality, just all the more capable of doing that. Moving the body towards one's goals is pretty easy for most people with Mars in Capricorn. From the soul-centered point of view, it speaks to the victory of the soul, having gone through the Scorpionic test, gone through Sagittarius, climbing the mountaintop, getting to the ability to actualize and achieve the goal of the soul, following on from what we just discussed with Mars and Sagittarius. So in summation, Mars, there's conflict, struggle, tests to overcome, particularly in its connection to Scorpio. And that's the big point. If the major takeaway from today is considering the transits of Mars and its connection to Scorpio as the way in which Mars is trying to bring the reflection to you of the lower nature of yourself, so that it can be crucified and can die off, basically, and make way for the soul. When we've got Mars working for the soul, it is indicative of great vitality, the capacity for the body to move in alignment with the goal of the soul, revealing the way in which there can be a beautiful synthesis and emerging with the opposite, the desire to meet the opposite there in Mars, which is also, by the way, why it is connected to sexuality from the lower level. The urge to merge, as we saw with Venus, is also the case to some degree with Mars, but at the occult level, it's the urge to merge with the soul and to bridge the gap between soul and personality there. And then we have the courageous warrior who is able to stand up for the cause, the sacrifice.